Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dimension Fold YouTube and podcast. And today we are privileged to have with us Samuel Chong, who is, it's a little bit of a funny story, so I'll get him to tell the story, I guess. But basically, he is representing um, Michel Desmarais. Is that the correct way to say his name?
Desmarquet.
Michel Desmarquet, who wrote a book and sadly is no longer with us, but is now has a few colleagues who are kind of taken his book and are trying to spread the word. So, Samuel, why don't you tell us, first of all, just tell us really briefly about the book, and then I'll ask you further questions.
Yes, according to Michel Desmarquet, the book writes about his personal experiences of being taken by the extraterrestrials who have a very advanced civilization to their planet for 9 days and then came back. He was told a lot of the mysteries of the paranormal on Earth, also about the meaning of life, stories in the Bible, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So, and tell us a little bit about Michel. Like, who was he?
He was born in Normandy, France, in the 1930s, and then later he went to Australia. He was a landscaper. He had a farm. He grew a lot of vegetables and crops, but one night he was taken away by the ETs.
Okay. So he had this abduction experience, and there was a lot of information that was parlayed to him by the extraterrestrials, which he wrote down in his native tongue of French, and has now been translated into several different languages. And the book is called sorry, can you pronounce it again?
Thiaoouba Prophecy.
Thiaoouba Prophecy. Okay. So, and I saw that it's on Amazon, one of the English editions, and your involvement comes with is it the Mandarin translation?
Yes, the Mandarin Chinese translation in China and Taiwan.
Okay. So how did you get involved in that?
Because I wanted to learn what he was not allowed to write in the book. The one thing that he was prohibited to write anything about it in the book, because according to him, is really incredible, and people are far from understanding that fact. I was very curious about it, and I visited him, and hoping that he could reveal that information to me. He refused the first time.
Yeah.
Not until I was able to get his book published in China and Taiwan.
Oh, okay. So then he eventually told you the secret?
Yes, the second time that I visited him, he told me personally what the secret was.
All right. Are you allowed to tell us?
Not really, but I could give as many hints as possible.
Okay.
According to according to him, Tao the ET instructed him not to reveal anything about it, and he instructed me to do the same. But he
Yeah.
didn't tell me that I couldn't make a quiz or a riddle or a puzzle out of it. I did
Okay.
that instead.
Okay. So maybe we may circle back to that. But first of all, what are some of the things that you are allowed to tell us? So I've skimmed a few sections of the book, and there's a lot of information in there. It seems like I guess first of all, just can you walk us through the basic narrative of what happens in the story? I'll use the word story, not to necessarily indicate that it's fictional or anything like that, but there's definitely a narrative taking place throughout the book. So yeah, give us a kind of a quick rundown on that.
Yes, so he in the middle of the night he was awoken and he wrote a note to his wife that he would be gone for 10 days and there's absolutely no need to worry about him. He walked to his backyard and he was lifted up into a parallel universe where the spaceship was stationed at. And then they took him to another planet, and then to their final destination, the planet Thiaoouba. On the way there, he was told a lot of facts about Earth, where the black people, where the yellow people came from, where the Caucasians came from, where the Jewish people came from, and also how many things evolved on Earth. And also interesting facts about what is it like in the parallel universe, who built the Great Pyramid, what are the ghosts, why some people can see ghosts, and also stories about the ET's interventions throughout history, such as the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah, and also Moses and Jesus Christ, and also the importance of being able to see auras and or human energy fields, and also pay attention to the therapeutic effects of colors, and also know the dangers of noise and also hallucinogenic drugs.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of health kind of related stuff that I noticed as well. Um, so so basically, is the idea that that aliens came to Earth in the past, and that's where humans come from, is that we have evolved or been planted here from an extraterrestrial society?
Actually, the universe has a lot of categories. We are on category 1 planet, and the Thiaoubans are on category 9 planet. So we have different levels. So Earth is like elementary school for us to learn the basics. And they, category 9, are like professors giving us directions in life, and also instructing us which way to go. And it's up to us whether to follow them or their suggestions or not. We have our own free will. So the black people and yellow people came from category 1 planet, and the Jewish people actually came from category 3 planet by accident.
Okay.
So that's very interesting because the Jewish people are certainly very unique in a very good way.
Yeah.
The book explains a lot of the history, like where we came from, and also it unveils some of the mysteries that people nowadays wonder about. Was there life on Mars? What's really going on the far side of the moon? Is there really alien bases like that? So the
Yeah.
book gives all the answers.
Okay, cool. And how long ago did that occur? Like when the first people arrived on Earth?
That was 1.35 million years ago. The black
Oh
people,
wow.
yellow, yes, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, so the black people and yellow people came first, and then the
Okay.
Caucasians, and then the Jewish people. Mm.
Okay. Did the Caucasians come separately, like a separate trip, or is it like a yeah?
Yeah, they came
Yeah.
on separate trips. They first landed on the continent of Atlantis, where in ancient times, about 14,500 years ago, it was really a continent in the Atlantic Ocean. And there they lived, and they were actually colonized by another group of ETs who lived on Earth on the continent of Lemuria.
Hmm.
And the Lemurians actually had very advanced technologies and civilization. Uh, but then 14,500 years ago, the continent sunk into the ocean. So the
Right.
great civilization was lost.
Okay. So I guess one question that part of it brings up to me is like all of us humans are all like this. I mean, we all have the same we're the same species. We have very small differences in our DNA between, like the book mentions the black people and the yellow people. And to me, that's like, I mean, granted, this book was written, what, in the 60s or something, or in
In
the
the
80s,
1980s.
1980s. And so maybe it's like pre woke kind of society a little bit. And
Mhm.
but it kind of smacks of a little bit of racism and stuff like that, which I don't think that he intends. But it does make you wonder, like, why, like, does it really add up to say that, different different types of people that are here now are really from different planets when we kind of all really are all the same. What do you think
Well,
about that?
yeah, I think this is a very interesting observation. The people who came here are mostly from Category 1 planets, and because the Earth has its own physical characteristics, so when people came here, and talking about the physical body and astral body, when the astral bodies came here, they go into the physical body that's really adapted to the local environment. So that's why we all have the similar DNA, but we all have astral bodies that are different. Especially,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
so it's almost like a different dimension, I guess.
yeah. The astral bodies, different dimensions. You can put
Yeah,
it that way.
yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so I think that answers my first question. What would you like to tell us about the book?
Yeah, the book is really an eye opener. So it really shocked me about the stories in the Bible because before I read this book, I even though I went to the church regularly, I didn't believe anything written in the Bible, not a single word.
Yeah.
It just seems to me that Jesus Christ was a fictional character.
Okay.
It's just impossible to perform the miracles. And there are a
Right.
lot of discrepancies or something that cannot be explained in the Bible, in its archaic language. And I think, but after reading this book, it really shows me that a lot of the inconsistencies or discrepancies in the Bible can be explained. For example, some people say that Jesus went to India, and also there's a tomb of Jesus Christ in Shingo village, Japan. And this book explains that in a very interesting way that the young Jesus, the baby Jesus born out of Virgin Mary, was actually a person from the embryo implanted by the ETs into Virgin Mary's uterus. That
Right.
Jesus was there, born out of Virgin Mary, was to fulfill the prophecies of the ancient scriptures that the Messiah was going to be born out of a virgin. Um, but because he was born that way through like an embryo, he would have to go through what they call a river of oblivion, forgetting everything that happened in his past lives and forgetting all the abilities and the knowledge to perform miracles. So this is why in the Bible there's no record of Jesus performing miracles before the age of 30.
Right.
Everything happened in a sudden, like after the age of 30, when he began to preach the messages. So the Jesus that could perform the miracles was actually someone sent by the Theobans, was one of them who they made a body that looked like the Jesus who went to Japan, and then they inserted their astral body into that physical body, so that the Christ who could perform miracles had all the knowledge to do so, and he knew what was going to happen in his life. He knew he was going to be crucified on the cross. He was indeed crucified on the cross and died and resurrected 3 days after. He did that just to show people at that time that there's life after death and there's reincarnation. But the concept of reincarnation was somehow erased or deleted by the Catholic Church councils. Reincarnation actually exists in a lot of religious beliefs, and modern science also proves that reincarnation exists. Like researchers done by Dr. Michael Newton, Dr. Brian Weiss, and Dr. Ian Stevenson. They all have circumstantial direct evidence that reincarnation exists.
Hmm. Well, it is interesting because it has not been completely scrubbed out of the Bible, despite the best efforts. Because when we see at the Transfiguration, where Jesus is up on the mountain, and it's what sounds like a UFO or a flying saucer comes down onto the mountain, and suddenly there are some people there, some perhaps extra dimensional or extraterrestrial. I mean, we don't really get a good description of them, other than that they're glowing. And but Jesus' disciples who are with him say, um, basically they think that it's Abraham or Isaiah or Enoch or one of those guys come back, where they already know that those guys are, well, dead, but maybe not dead because maybe they were taken up into UFOs and never died. But it's interesting because there's this, there's enough evidence there that you have to question, well, what's going on in this story here? Something strange is happening.
Especially, yes, I really agree. I totally agree because the Bible was written about 2,000 years ago. So it's using analogy. Jesus was trying to preach to what we call the ancient people at that time. So it's very similar to what we are trying to, if we are trying to tell a caveman the dangers of atomic bomb, we have to use a lot of analogy or parables. This is
Right.
what Jesus did to the people at that time. So the Bible was written that way, using a lot of parables, analogies, and so we have to interpret the Bible in a very interesting way. I really agree with you that there was a lot of evidence that UFOs or spacecraft, alien spacecrafts that really appeared in the Bible multiple times. And in fact, Michel Desmarquet, the author of Thiaoouba Prophecy, when he read the book of Enoch, he was shocked because the descriptions by Enoch are really similar to what he personally experienced going on his trip to the planet Thiaoouba. So he really believed that Enoch was taken by the same group of ETs to their planet.
Yeah, well, we have Enoch, who is said to be taken by the Lord, and he just was not, like he just disappeared, essentially. We have Isaiah, who was taken up in some kind of fiery chariot, like a metallic object, and then on Mount Sinai, famously, Moses witnessed what appears to be a humongous flying saucer, that could fit dozens of people aboard. And I talk about that in my book, UFOs in the Bible. And yeah, there's about 50 other, almost, well, 45, I think, is the number of instances that I counted that appear to be talking about flying saucers. And we've been interpreting them in this kind of metaphysical, or like this sort of, I don't know, I mean, I guess I could say spiritual, but what does that even mean in this context when we have physical phenomenon are happening? And then I think that the Christianity has done a poor job of understanding and interpreting and kind of bringing those stories into the actual the conventional understanding of what the Bible's saying. But if you really read the Bible in Hebrew, there's a lot of really strange things going on that are not, they're just really covered up by the translations that we have grown accustomed to.
Yeah, I go to a church, a local church in Alhambra called the Mandarin Baptist Church in Los Angeles. And
Yeah.
when I try to convey the idea that there's some evidence or in the Bible written about the flying saucers, they kind of rejected that idea.
Yeah, they don't like that too much.
I'm just wondering what we can do to make the Christians, so-called Christians, more open-minded.
Yeah, well, I think it's good that I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot more books coming out now where that are really tying these ideas together. My book is only one of several others. Um, I think we do have to kind of learn to look at things a little bit differently and start to ask questions, and instead of just going along with whatever so and so tells us and just believing, which is difficult, because if you question, then a lot of times you will get an answer like, well, you just have to have faith. But Jesus never told us, his message was not to just trust in man. In fact, it was the opposite. He said explicitly, "Do not trust in man." And yet, this is all we're doing because when we believe the Orthodox teachings and we just swallow whatever pill they're trying to feed us on Sunday, then we're just trusting in man, and that's not what faith means. That's not the faith that Jesus talked about. He said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you'll move mountains. And the things that he was doing were miraculous in many ways. And that's the faith that he's talking about, faith to do miracles. Um, yeah, so it is quite fascinating. And I did wanted to mention as well, like when you were talking about Jesus and possibly I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounded to me like you were saying that Mary was impregnated by some kind of extraterrestrial or extra dimensional force, which is essentially what the Bible says, because it says God impregnated her, and God is nothing if not interdimensional. But one thing that I found in my research was that the same thing happened essentially. They don't make a big deal about mentioning the woman's virginity in these other stories, but the same thing happened to Elizabeth, who is Mary's cousin, and to Samson's mother, and to I think there were 3 or 4 women who had this exact same thing happen to them, and basically there is a parallel string which runs through all of those, because every time that this happened, the angel, which we don't really know what an angel is, but there was a guy there whose name is Gabriel, and this Gabriel guy shows up, and suddenly women are getting pregnant everywhere. So it's a very strange story, also considering the timelines involved between the earliest example and up to the time of Mary and Jesus is hundreds of years, if not more. So it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, and the book really goes into a lot of details about specific Catholic Church councils that removed certain or intentionally changed the original scriptures of the Bible. It named 4 different council meetings. The Council of Nicaea is one of the 4. And the book goes into details about passages in Genesis regarding the discrepancies in the Bible that really, if you look into details, that really goes against the main doctrines or beliefs of the current Catholic Church. And I will suggest people or viewers or audience to really check out the book and read that chapter on who is Christ, to learn about the discrepancies in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and in Genesis, and to learn more about it. One of the main messages.
I'm going to read that. I'm going to read that chapter. Which chapter is that? What number?
I think it's the chapter title is Who is Christ?
Oh, okay.
So it tells the history of Jesus Christ. Also, a little bit about Moses, how they parted the sea. So
Moses is a really interesting character. I mean, basically, he's Egyptian, but that part, like, that's totally obvious that he's an Egyptian. But nobody talks about that, and you're not really allowed to mention that. It's like they purposely made this very clean break. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, this book specifically mentioned that Moses was an Egyptian, not a Hebrew. So it's kind of proves your point too.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess there's a lot of information and a kind of a lot of very detailed narrative and a lot of dialogue and stuff like that between Michel and his abductees, if you will, or his hosts.
Okay.
What are the I guess what are the main points that they're like? Well, why did they take him? Is one question.
The reason is that why do they take him now is that we are in a very critical moment of time. We are at a cross point, and it's very important for us to make the right decisions right now for the future, because we are too focused on the material aspect of life, the technologies, and not so focused on the spiritual development aspect of our lives. So if we keep doing that, we are going to be facing a very dangerous future. So this is why they're using Michel Desmarquet to send a message to us to help us indirectly so that we can learn on our own to make the right decisions. Why did they choose him, not other people? So there are two aspects of that reason of that point. Is that according to them, because they are taking him on Category 9 planet, in order to survive for 9 days on their planet, a person would have to have 80 past lives. So Michel Desmarquet was one of the few people on Earth at that time who had 80 past lives already. So they took him. And the other reason was that I think is because he was just a landscaper. He didn't have any agenda or presuppositions or predispositions. And this is just like a blank piece of paper to write on. So he would be able to report accurately what he observed and experienced. If he were like a journalist or someone who has a big ego or someone who has a big purpose, then they would not report accurately and write a book to the letter.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned a particular village in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
What was it called again?
It's called Shingo Village.
Shingo Village. Yeah.
Yes, Shingo.
Yeah. So this is intriguing because this is the third time this week that I've heard about this story where Jesus apparently was living in Shingo Village in Japan. So it's becoming a popular piece of information, and yet I had not heard about it before this week. So it's interesting that this book was written for what, 40 years ago?
Yes.
40 years almost.
Yes.
And then now this piece of information is suddenly becoming widespread. Is this like the source of that, or have you heard of this Shingo Village from other sources as well?
I heard about Shingo Village from this book in the very beginning. But then I did a lot of research and found that other people talked about it. And after this book was published, and some people shot videos and visited the village and found a lot of very interesting customs of the people in the village. When they sing songs, they sing a song which sounded like the ancient Hebrew language. And they also had a lot of different customs, very different from other Japanese customs.
Oh, interesting. So it's almost like a different culture or civilization type of very different kind of different from the surrounding communities.
Yes, very different.
Huh. And there's also a claim that of almost the same type of thing of another remote village in northern India. I believe it's in the Kashmir somewhere. What do you make of those claims?
Well, I think Jesus, the one who couldn't perform miracles, traveled there too. And really, because according to Thiaoouba Prophecy, he traveled with his brother to India and to China. And his brother died in China, and he took some of his brother's hair as a something to remember of him of, and then to Japan. And then when he died, he had the hair of his brother buried in a tomb next to his tomb. So there are two tombs in Shingo Village, Japan, so people can verify that information.
Okay. So in this story, the original Jesus, I guess if you will, whatever they called him then, it wasn't Jesus. But there was this Hebrew guy in Israel with and his brother, and then they left and traveled to the east, and then that the Jesus character was replaced by the extraterrestrials,
Yes.
and that's why he has these powers.
The reason for them to do that was to really be able to perform miracles, because people at that time, just like what we are nowadays, we have to see someone very different, more powerful than us, in order to believe his preachings or his teachings. So
Hmm.
if Jesus was not able to perform miracles in the ancient past, people wouldn't have believed him. So this is
Right,
why they have to make
right.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's true because we're not, we can't just believe whatever everybody tells us. And
Mhm.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I have a hard time believing a lot of the stuff that Michelle has written here. Um, not that I'm going to say I do believe it or don't believe it, but I'm going to say that a lot of it is a little bit hard to believe, and that's good because I think we need to question these things and we need to ask for evidence.
Yeah,
So, yeah, is there any like physical evidence or anything to corroborate his story?
yeah. The book was written in the late 80s, and a lot of evidence actually came after the book was published. For example, this book talks about the life on Mars and also the alien bases on the moon. So, in the late 80s, people never mentioned or never started to didn't start to talk about life on Mars or alien bases on the far side of the moon. But
Hmm.
uh, but nowadays, people talk about it, and this book specifically mentioned that back 300,000 years ago, there was life on Mars, but because the core of Mars was cooling down, um, and the life forms couldn't survive anymore. So that's why there's no life form on Mars anymore. I did some research. When the core of a planet cools down, it loses the electromagnetic field, so that when the planet doesn't have the electromagnetic field anymore, atmosphere won't be able to be captured. So if
Right,
there's no oxygen, then there's not going to be any life on Mars. So this is
right.
why Mars is a desert planet or a dead planet.
Okay. And so that was did you say 30,000 or 300,000?
300,000 years ago.
300,000 years ago. So that's, I mean, given that timeline, there would be even with the very thin atmosphere that Mars currently has, there would be enough erosion over 300,000 years that it would essentially scour away any traces of whatever remained, right? Like if there could have been skyscrapers and New York style cities there, but in that amount of time, it would essentially evaporate or just like I mean the between erosion and the chemical I can't think of the word suddenly, but where chemicals break down and things rust and decay and all that stuff. Like yeah, that's a long time.
Yes.
So it's not surprising that there's barely any trace of anything left on Mars. Although that's also debatable because a lot of people um, are really kind of talking about like finding structures on Mars and like that some of the new NASA photos, like out of the last couple of years, we've been seeing some photos that they do almost look like some kind of man-made structure, but it's hard to tell, right? So yeah, that's kind of interesting. The moon base is kind of another interesting point. I wonder if you have any insider information on the rumors that the Chinese government has set up a moon base on the backside of the moon already in the last 2 years.
It's certainly not the Chinese government. They
No,
took they took photos on the far side of the moon, but they didn't really set up any alien bases. They don't have the ability. Trust me, I know the Chinese government.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Did their photos reveal anything interesting though?
They didn't. They did the same thing that the NASA did. They erased a lot of things. I know the Chinese government. When they accomplish something, they would boast it immediately.
Yeah.
They wouldn't wait for maybe 2 days or so to release the photos. I mean,
Okay.
there must be something happening in the 2 day period of time. So I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fishy.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Um, so I guess the point of the main message of the book is sort of a warning to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, I studied economics at UC Berkeley, the college that I went to. And actually, I pay a lot of attention to what's happening around the world. I foresee that there's going to be some kind of economic collapse or turmoil in the near future, if not already happening. And
Mhm.
this book actually gives a solution for people, or gives a suggestion to the people who have been or will be encountering life challenges. So it tells people or readers to look inside of themselves and to seek for answers, and not to
Mhm.
seek for answers from the agents or intermediaries like pastors in the church or kind of gurus or something like that, because
Mhm.
the kingdom of God is within you. It's a Bible verse. So the
Right.
book says that we can communicate with God, the Creator, directly by either praying or by meditation, or even by having a good night of sleep. Because when God created humans like us, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each one of us. So we are part of God and we can connect at any time with the creator or the source through our higher self. So it asks people really to look inside of themselves for answers. If the solutions or the responses are good for the spiritual growth, the answers will be provided to you. So this is actually one of the main messages in the book.
Hmm. And then it talks a lot about like peace and stop using nuclear weapons and kind of that obvious kind of stuff. Um, I guess. Well, does it go into like what does it say anything about the nature of God? Because like if we're talking about we're talking about extraterrestrial beings or interdimensional or whatever. So that's like okay. So there's other entities out there, and they're concerned for our well-being and our kind of our stupidity in ruining our planet and killing each other. Um, are they God, or is there another entity that is that kind of more correlates to our concept of God?
Yeah, the God in their mind is actually the source or the ether that created the entire universe, including all the ETs, different kinds of extraterrestrials, including
Hmm.
the Thiaoubans. And the different levels of ETs have different roles in the universe. Like, for example, the Thiaoubans actually have the role of guiding us and sometimes also punishing us just like the two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. Um,
Yeah.
but they're not God. They're just like guardian angels or what we call mentors. So they're not God, even though they can perform all the miracles performed by Jesus Christ. They can levitate. They don't die. They are forever young looking. They don't age at all. They're forever very beautiful. They're hermaphrodites, and they can shapeshift. They can materialize objects. They can communicate through telepathy. So basically, what Jesus did in the Bible, as described in the Bible, they can do that as well.
Hmm. Well, and that really reminds me of the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, and which is very briefly mentioned in the Book of Genesis. Um, like, do you think that these guys are the Watchers? Have they been like orbiting, or like maybe they don't need to orbit because they can remote sense us from far away? But are they're clearly keeping an eye on us?
So this book is very interesting. It has a lot of very interesting details that can be verified by the people who are interested in. The ETs actually have been watching us throughout history, especially in the last few decades or so. They were actually involved in World War II. They prevented Germany being the first country to develop the atomic bomb. In a way, they helped the U.S. government to successfully deploy the bomb in Japan earlier than Germany because in their mind, the US government was more sincere in helping humanity at that time. They say that in doing so, they prevented twice as much as people from dying in World War II. So they kind of intervened many times. There's also a very interesting detail in the book in which they prevented uh, several hundreds of millions of needles from being released in space. So when NASA was trying to release a lot of needles, copper needles into space in order to improve the telecommunication system. They were hoping that the signals would bounce back after hitting the copper needles in space. But so they had a project in the 1960s called Project Westford. But Thiaoubans believed that the needles were harmful to us, so they prevented they prevent the needles from being released. So that's why we see that NASA failed that Project Westford. So this is their direct information.
I've never heard of that project. That must be still classified then.
Well, they released a certain information already, so it's already public
Okay.
information. Yeah.
So somehow the author had information revealed to him about a top secret mission. At that time, it would have still been classified.
Yes.
And he had this information that we now can see. Like how much detail has the released information? Like does it talk about needles?
Yes, it talks about hundreds of millions of needles released into space, and then they prevented that from happening. And so
Wow.
this is one such information. Another very interesting information would be that it talks about the U.S. government at the time was developing a time machine.
Hmm.
The ETs in this book were actually helping the U.S. government to successfully developing a time machine. Because according to this book, if you read the chapter titled "The Psychosphere," it says that the U.S. government has failed to develop that time machine because they were focusing on wavelength instead of frequency or vibrations.
Oh,
So it makes me think about the Philadelphia experiment.
right. Yeah, that's so we were this close to getting a time machine, and then well, why didn't the ETs intercede and ensure completion of the project? Did they
Well,
go into that?
I'll use an example or analogy. If I'm a child and I'm learning certain things about regarding solving a mathematical problem, then a very wise parent would tell me the concept, the basic concept, and then it will be up to me to find a way based on the concept to solve the problem on my own. That
Hmm.
way I can get the most out of it. If my
Right,
parents just tell me the answer directly without telling me how to do that, the basic concepts, I wouldn't have learned anything like that. So this is
right,
the same way that ETs are helping us indirectly, just giving us the basic concepts. And then we are taking the challenges on our own in order to learn the lessons.
Okay. So yeah, because they don't want to they don't want to spoon feed us in a way. They want us to learn on our own as well.
They never serve
Interesting.
the meal on the plate.
Yeah. Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I don't know. We've got maybe 5 or 10 minutes left. In closing, or what do you wish? What would you like to talk about that we haven't already covered, if anything?
Well, I strongly suggest people to get a book either from a library, ask your library, local libraries to get a book for you, or to purchase a book on Amazon or download
Yeah.
it from the internet. So either way, just get a book. It's not for monetary gains. It's for information. It's for the messages.
Right. And
Because
I want to be clear. I don't even think that you get anything if it, like you're not involved in the English translation of the book at all.
not at
You're,
all.
you're not the publisher. You're not the editor. You have no monetary interest. You just want to represent the story and get that story out there.
Yes, because we
Yeah.
have been having a lot of turbulent times in the
Yeah.
world, and I really want the messages to be out to help people so that
Right.
they know how to respond.
Right. So for any Chinese speaking readers, that if they were to purchase your translation of the book, some of those proceeds will assist you in your further work. No?
No, I don't get
Okay.
anything out of it.
You get nothing from any of it. Wow.
Yeah, nothing.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because a lot of times we've talked a couple times already about should we trust people or should we just like believe everything that we hear and obviously not and a lot of times those one of the reasons is because people are trying to scam us or trying to make a quick buck or whatever. But you're obviously not that guy because there's nothing in this for you other than knowing that the word is getting out about some of these fascinating and, if true, very kind of world changing. Some of these ideas, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
The book is especially good for people who have life challenges or relationship issues because it really tells you how to respond to such challenges. And especially, I know that in the last 2 years or so, the Chinese government did a lot of terrible things, and Chinese people were the victims too. And so are the people in the United States and around the world.
Hmm.
So really, we need to open our eyes and to look for information and for things to lead us to respond to such situations.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, thank you very much, Samuel, for coming on the show today, and it's been very fascinating and enlightening, and I'm definitely more keen to read a lot more of that book now after having spoken to you. So I think job well done. You've accomplished what you set out to do, and hopefully some of our listeners will pick up that book as well. I'll have another link right here. I'll just put it on top. And again, this is a picture of the book, and here's the Amazon link as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Samuel, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Ken. Bye bye.
Okay.